never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with Mr. William Doucette of Douglas, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. All right, Mr. Doucette, could you start by giving us a little bit of background on yourself? Tell us kind of where and when were you born, for instance?
I was born in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Okay, and what year?
1921.
All right, and what part of the Upper Peninsula were you in?
The copper mining region. My father worked for $2 a day, 4 days a week. Family of 8 children.
Mm-hmm. Now, did he continue to work in mining through the 30s, or did he change jobs?
Yeah, because of a lung condition he developed after being gassed in World War I.
Mm-hmm.
They gave him a job as night watchman so he could work outside, and that seemed to help him.
And then did he keep that job through the 30s and the Depression era, or?
He kept that job until perhaps 1940, when I sent enough money home for him to come to Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, did you finish high school?
Yes.
Okay. And then what did you do after you finished high school?
I left home, went to Chicago to apply for a job. I applied for a job in the engineering department of a company.
Mm-hmm.
I had no engineering degree, but I had actually 5 years of mechanical and architectural drawing during high school, and I had 5 years of A's.
Okay.
But this company I went to saw my plates and everything, and the guy was quite impressed and everything, but he said, we'd like our men to have some practical experience. So he sent me to Brookville, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
This was a company that designed and installed automatic sprinkler systems for fire protection. He sent me to Brookville, Indiana, where I worked in a casket factory, installing an automatic sprinkler system.
Mm-hmm.
Stayed at a boarding house for $7 a week. I did that for 2 years, worked throughout the South. In West Virginia, I worked in boiler plants, chemical plants. I worked at Nash Motors in Kenosha, Wisconsin. I worked at a meat packing plant in Iowa, paper mill in Peshtigo, Wisconsin.
All right. So what was it like for you to be kind of wandering around the country like that? I mean, did you enjoy doing that?
At age 17, I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
This is when guys are going out with girls and everything, and I was always in a strange town, and no car, no bicycle,
mm-hmm.
no radio, no television, and just me in the boarding house, me in a bed and a dresser. I hated it.
Right.
My father would write to me. I'd write and say I wanted to come home. I didn't have enough money to go home. My father said, this is the age of specialization, so stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
Someday you'll get into the engineering department. Well, they called me in the engineering department when I was 19.
Okay, so it'd be 1940 then?
That was 1941.
Okay, so early 41 maybe? Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So then you actually get to go to Chicago, and you can stay in one place now? And
Yeah. And that's when I sent money home, and my father came to Chicago, and then my 2 sisters came to Chicago, and we lived in a furnished apartment. It's on the borderline of a black area. It was safe, but very meager.
mm-hmm.
A Murphy bed that my 2 sisters slept in. My dad slept on a sofa, and I slept on the floor.
Now, did your sisters go and get jobs too, or?
Yes, they got jobs. But then several months later came Pearl Harbor, and I applied it.
How did you hear about Pearl Harbor? Or do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
Just on the radio.
Okay. And before that, had you been paying any attention to what was going on in the world, the war in Europe or that kind of thing?
Way back when I was in high school, I thought I really thought Hitler had to be stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons why I enlisted in this CMTC summer program and went 2 years, because I really wanted to get into the military.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about the CMTC program. What was that? How did it work?
We lived in tents with the infantry at Fort Brady, Sault Ste. Marie.
Mm-hmm.
And my first year I was 15, you had to be 16, but they said, tell them you're 16. So I did. Hitchhiked from home, and took about 4 days. And at Fort Brady, we had a lot of close order drill. It was an officer candidate. It was a 4-year program. You get a commission. A lot of close order drill. Out on a rifle range, qualified on a 1918 rifle, Springfield rifle.
Right.
Qualified on a 50 caliber,
Machine gun.
belt-fed, water-cooled, tripod-mounted machine gun.
So one of those big round-barreled things that you see in old World War I movies. Yeah.
That's cool as a 15, 16-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Qualified on the 45 caliber pistol. We had gas mask drills. They had actual canisters of poison gas left over from World War I.
Mm-hmm.
Chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas. They'd release those canisters into a big cloud, and you had your gas mask. You just run, and you had to inhale and identify the gas before you put your gas mask on. If you put it on too soon, they'd send you back, and you have to go, choke to death. Yeah, that's chlorine.
Now, did you do different things with the gas mask for a different gas, or why did you have to know what kind it was first?
Just to identify it by the smell.
Mm-hmm.
Chlorine smells like chlorine.
Right.
Mustard smells like, and phosgene smells like, it's most innocuous, smells like new mown hay.
Mm-hmm.
You might be inclined to say, but it'll kill you.
All right. So it was just a recognition thing. So in case you didn't notice someone shooting gas at you and you got into some, you'd know what it was and you could react.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. And so you're doing that while you were still in high school.
Right.
Okay. But then when you finished high school, you had to go off and work, so you couldn't continue with the rest of that program. Then.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. Now, at the same time, you're a little more aware than a lot of teenagers were, maybe, of what was going on in a lot of the rest of the world.
Oh, yeah.
And to some extent, you'd had to be a little bit more grown up, a little bit faster because of the kind of work you were doing.
Yeah.
All right. So when the war happens, then did you decide that you should just go and enlist, or how did that?
Immediately, maybe it was, I don't know, January or February.
Mm-hmm.
I checked out the Navy, Marines, Army. I heard about the Aviation Cadet Program. And initially, you had to be at least 20 years old, but not older than 25.
Right.
Very strict physical and mental conditions. You had to have 2 years of college. But then they changed it, I don't know at what point, if you could pass an equivalency test.
Right.
So I passed the equivalency test, but it was a slow process. You take the physical, and then you wait a couple months, and you take the mental, and then you wait, and then they call you and you get sworn in, and then you wait to get called when they have a full enough class, to start another flying.
So when did you actually start your training then?
I don't know, May of '42, I think.
Okay. And where did you go for that training?
Let's see, I went to Nashville, Tennessee. That's for classification.
And then
If you're suitable to be a pilot, if not, maybe bombardier or navigator. Then from there to Kelly Field, San Antonio for pre-flight.
all right. And what did the pre-flight training consist of?
This is strange. It's a great deal of discipline. You know what close order drill is? Marching in formation.
Right.
We had more close order drill than the Army did, and we're aviation cadets. And with white gloves, that's so your hand movement had to be exact. And with rifles, with fixed bayonets. If you have your rifle and you're not carrying it properly, the rifle is so high. If you're this much out, it shows up with a bayonet. It can just be at 1 degree, and it shows. So We had close order drill with lots and lots of it. Formal retreat parade with white gloves every night. A lot of classes, theory of flight and map reading and Morse code. Plane identification by silhouette. Ship identification by silhouette. You know, Japanese, German, American, British, the whole ball game.
And how well did you do at all that?
I did well. Yeah. We didn't receive grades. But
Right.
I did well. I liked it. You were busy from 6 o'clock in the morning till 9 at night. Then you had an hour of whatever you want to do. We didn't get any leave to go to town or anything. But 9 to 10 you could write home or
Right.
do whatever you want. 10 o'clock, lights out, complete silence until the next morning.
What sort of people did you have training you? Were these just regular Army people marching you around, or what?
Yeah, for the close order drill. Yeah, like drill, you know, like Army drill
Yeah.
sergeants. The same routine. For a lot of the classes, we had officers.
Did you have any civilian instructors at that point in any of the classes, or were they all Army people?
We had some civilian instructors.
Okay. What kind of things would they teach, or do you not remember that much?
Well, there's map reading. There's Morse code. I mentioned about the identification
Yeah.
of
Okay.
planes and ships and so on.
Now, how long did that basic training go on?
As I recall, it was 9 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. That's called primary.
Right.
Primary. No, it's pre-flight. That's a long
Yes.
time of pre-flight.
Mm-hmm.
Then we didn't even see a plane during primary.
Right. And then what comes next after that pre-flight?
Primary.
All right. And what was that?
Went to it was called Hatbox Field, a little private field in Muskogee, Oklahoma, where we flew PT-17s, a primary trainer, number 17. 175 horsepower Allison inline engine. And you fly that until you're capable of soloing, and then you solo. What a wonderful feeling. The first time, you're still in the trainer plane, you're with the instructor's seat up there, but it's empty. But you're running the whole thing. It's amazing how many guys that get panicky, get afraid to land, keep going over and over the stage house. You know, wave flags to get them to come down.
Now, were there accidents there while you were there?
Oh yeah, there's guys that got killed. And
And again, you adjusted to this part pretty well. You enjoyed the flying.
yeah.
All right. And then at the end of that, then what happens?
I went to basic.
Okay. And basic flight training, then what did that consist of?
Well, we had a smattering of. I'm at a loss for words. I don't know. We flew different planes. All the same planes, but different than the PTs. They're basic.
Okay. These were all
Still single engine.
Now, were they open cockpit, closed cockpit?
They had a sliding covered
They had a
cockpit.
Okay. And were these still two-seaters, so you could have an instructor with you?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And that's where I washed out.
All right. And can you explain how you wound up washing out of that program? It's kind of a distinctive story.
Oh, we had an instructor in theory of flight who just as a matter of course said, okay, you guys are going for your check flights. Again, it's important that you show the instructor you have confidence in the plane. Don't be timid.
Now, what was a check flight exactly? What was that supposed to do?
That was an instructor different from your normal instructor. It was like an impartial review or whatever the hell you might call it. I don't know.
Are there specific kinds of things you have to be able to do with the plane that they're checking off or making sure that you can do?
They tell you everything before you leave, and that's. I want you to climb to 20,000 square feet, do a series of power on stalls, a series of power off stalls. After you recover from that, pylon turns, and just a bunch of stuff you had to remember. But
So you're doing a whole string of different aerobatics, really, then?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So what happened when you had your check flight?
I think my downfall, wasn't aware of it, but it went into a spin, and we were told best not to get below 4,500 square feet, because then the arc of, you have to hit the ground before you pull out.
Mm-hmm.
And the altimeters aren't too accurate. They weren't too accurate on those planes, at least. I was just going more by feel, and I thought, I can let it go a little while. I still think I can pull it out. And
Right. So you knew what the plane could do physically from having flown it before and done this before?
I thought I did. I was actually a novice, you know.
Mhm.
But
All right. Now, who did you have as the instructor or evaluator along with you? Or what did you know? What could you tell about him? Or
I'd never seen him previously.
right?
You have your standard, your regular instructor,
Mhm.
who was always assigned to you, and then for check flight, he was a flying officer.
Okay. Now you're going into this dive or this spin, or were you spinning as you were going down?
Yes.
Okay. And then what happened in that caused a problem?
I wasn't aware of a problem, but it's just going by feel, and it's time to pull out now. You kick opposite rudder to stop it from spinning. You pull back on the stick to start to pull it up, and I pulled back on the stick. The instructor pulled back on the stick, and I saw the instructor's head just go like that. Oh my God!
So he had passed out?
Yeah, just momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
Just momentarily, and then I don't know if we both pulled it out, or if I pulled it out, or what. Then when we landed, I took off the parachute and threw it up on the empennage, waiting for the good news.
Mm-hmm. And then what did the instructor say to you?
He said, "I'm afraid you'll wind up killing yourself, and that's your problem, but these planes are hard to replace." I couldn't prove it or anything, but they used to tell us, we didn't have access to booze anyway, but they used to tell us, no alcohol at least 24 hours before you fly. We flew every day, so.
Right.
But this guy was 35, and he was an officer, and I thought, well, maybe he, and that just, maybe he had a few drinks the night before. Maybe that's why, because it didn't seem right. And he didn't downright faint, but his head went to the side, and then he recovered. But he had
And you kind of maybe there's a connection there between him having that happen to him, and maybe he's a little spooked or whatever he decides
I
to
have
fail
no
you.
idea, or maybe not spooked, maybe embarrassed.
Mm-hmm. And so the result is, at that point, they wash you out of pilot training. All right.
Yeah.
So what then do you do after that?
You just get shipped out.
And where did you go?
Went to Coffeyville, Kansas.
Mm-hmm. And what were you doing there?
Just hanging around.
Okay. And were you still with the Air Corps at that point?
Yeah, it was just a private with a no more fancy uniform or anything. Just private, just sitting around, unassigned.
So how long did you have to do that?
I really don't know. 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay.
I heard about instrument flying school at Randolph Field in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied for that and I got sent there.
Okay. So you were far enough along in your own flight training experience at that point that you were qualified to do this type of training.
Yeah, I was not qualified to do in-flight instrument flying.
Right.
It was strictly with simulators.
Okay. Now, what did they have by way of simulators, in 1943?
It was called a link trainer, and it was a desk with a monitor that traced on a piece of paper where the plane was going, and instruments showed the elevation and things of that nature. And the trainer itself was electrically operated and a bunch of bellows, a little stubby winged looking thing. It would never fly, of course.
Mhm.
And you get in there, you pull the hood over and it's completely dark. So
Mhm.
you're like flying in a
Right.
dense cloud. All you can see is the instruments. You learn to fly by instrument, flying the beam,
Mhm.
the ADCOG system of 4 towers emitting beams and flying the beam and watching your runway localizer and your glide path indicator, your instruments to know exactly what the plane is doing.
Mhm. Okay. And then, did you like doing that, or was that a good job, or not such a good job?
I enjoyed it. It was like a civilian job. We just worked 8-hour shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And we had captains and majors come in, because every once in a while they had to brush up on it,
Mm-hmm.
and we were just simple enlisted men. But,
Yeah. Yeah, you were still a private at this point.
well, I became a corporal, but
Okay.
big deal.
All right. But normally, were trainers supposed to be officers, or?
They said they didn't have any standards.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have any standards, but they said the MOS calls for a warrant officer, to be a warrant officer. But I don't know if any of the guys became warrant officers after I left. We were in a barracks. There were 50 of us at advanced flying school.
Mm-hmm.
I asked to be sent overseas. The other guys, coincidentally, I got home on February 6th. The guys that I was in the barracks with, I found out later, they were home way before me.
Mm-hmm. Even though you went overseas.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, at what point do you decide you want to get sent overseas? You're doing this for a while, and then, or why did you decide to ask to go overseas?
I don't know, because I'm an oddball. I
Okay.
just thought, hey, this is easy, but
Mm-hmm.
it was very easy. You could go into town at night, and girls are important, and I thought, well, I'm not really doing my part.
Okay, so it just didn't seem like you were necessarily doing enough, and
Yeah.
you ought to do something different. All right, so you apply for overseas service, and then what happens after that?
Nothing.
Okay.
A lot of things. I went overseas, but I didn't think it through. I thought, well, I'll go for overseas, so they'll train me for something, or I
Mm-hmm.
qualified on some of this infantry stuff, and maybe they'll, I don't know.
Well, what sort of training did they give you before they sent you overseas?
Mostly survival training, and what to do if you're shot down at sea,
Mm-hmm.
what to do in the jungle, how to react if you're a POW.
So they're
one
training you as if you might be doing something, special forces-y or something like that, or behind enemy lines.
I don't know. Maybe they give everybody the same thing, I would assume. But I lost my train of thought.
Well, I was just asking about the kind of, now where were you doing that training?
Camp Kearns, outside of Salt Lake City, Utah.
Okay, so you're outside of Utah. And what kind of people were you training alongside when you were there? Were they from all over the military, or?
Yeah, some paratroopers, a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only weirdo. I was one of a kind.
Okay. They didn't have anybody else coming out of the Air Forces who was
No,
of
no.
that sort doing that. Okay. So you're with a bunch of people, and you don't know any of these people, and you're not part of any particular group. You're
No.
just getting this training. All right. And how long did that go on, roughly?
It was brief. I don't know.
A couple of weeks, or?
Yeah, maybe 3 weeks.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then where did you go from there?
Camp Stoneman, California.
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh, California. How about that?
Yeah. And was that just a staging area waiting to be shipped out, or did you do
Yeah,
that?
we were just there and
Mm-hmm.
got on a freighter. The freighter, and we call it down in the bilge. We were
Mhm.
actually down in where they normally carry the freight.
Right.
There might have been 4,000 of us.
Okay.
No portholes, no.
Ugh. Now, and then where did you sail to?
Our eventual goal was Hollandia, New Guinea.
All right.
31 days.
Now, did you stop any place along the way?
No.
No, okay. So what was that ride like, aside from crowded?
Boring, crowded, frightening. We were just a freighter and out on the Ocean.
Were you by yourself, or were you in a convoy?
No convoy.
No convoy, just out there on your own?
Yeah, see, they never told us they didn't tell us where we were going, but I know now that the reason it took so long, the Japanese practically control the Pacific. And we knew that we left California, we were going south and south and south, and we thought, well, California, we were going over, but we went so far south, well, we're going through the Panama Canal and we're going to Europe.
Well, you may well have zigzagged a lot, too.
Yeah.
Just changed course a lot to avoid submarines, because that was the issue at that point. Now, when did you arrive in New Guinea? I mean, was it in 44 by then, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and by that time, the Japanese were getting pushed farther north, but they still had a lot of submarines out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and occasionally aircraft, so
Yeah.
they could still be dangerous. All right. Now, in the course of that month on the water, did you get to spend much time up on deck and get any fresh air, or were you just mostly in the hold?
We were mostly down below.
Did you hit any storms while you were crossing?
Yeah. Yeah. There were sometimes when we were allowed up on the deck when you'd be way down here and the waves would be way up there. Other times you'd be riding the crest, unusual situation. And of course, a lot of guys seasick.
Did you worry that maybe the ship was going to capsize or sink or anything like that?
No, I think the time we most concerned when we hear that signal, whatever you call it, it's Garuga, Garuga. You know, we'd all go below and just get the hell down below, and an armed Marine guard there, and go down below and you hear them clunk the door, the hatch, whatever you call it, shut, and you're down there and no portholes. And then you're accustomed to hearing that engine because you're down there and it's loud, and if there's a submarine alert, we didn't know if it's for real or they cut the engine so you get the dead silence. Then you hear an explosion. They're dumping ash cans.
Depth charges. Yeah.
Depth charges.
So the ship you were on had its own depth charges?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, okay, so then you make it into New Guinea. What did that look like when you got there? What did you see when you arrived?
Native men on the beach, and with their interesting absence of clothing, and some of them had little loincloths or something, little like shoelaces around their waist and around their legs, and a ram's horn on their prominent part.
Okay.
The chief is the one with the largest ram horn. A lot of red mud and white streaks on their faces and everything, but they seem to be friendly.
Yeah. Was there much of a base there at all, or just tents, or?
Just tents, yeah.
Okay.
And we were kept away from them. We were kept in our tents and everything. It was just a stopover.
Right. And so you just stay there for a little while. You didn't have any duties at that point. You're just waiting for something to happen. Okay.
I didn't have any duties for months and months.
So what were you doing then? You're in Hollandia, then they ship you someplace else. Where'd you go after that?
Finchhaven, on the other side of the island. Tacloban and Leyte, on the island of Leyte.
So they move you up to Leyte, so now you're getting up to the end of 44, early 45 in that period.
Yeah.
Because we land in Leyte in the fall of 44.
Yeah.
All right. And when you got there, I mean, Tacloban was also where they had an airfield and so forth. Were you supposed to be doing flight training, or do you have any idea what you were supposed to be doing?
No, I was just, like, nobody knew I was there.
So how did you spend your time?
I'd volunteer, not for KP or anything, but I drive a gasoline truck, drive a Jeep, stand guard. And I got to Tacloban they finally, you know, we were like Air Force ground crew, whatever.
Right.
And we weren't armed except that there's one man in every tent that could have and they assigned me a Thompson submachine gun because I had experience on
Right.
a lot of arms, so I was the only guy that had a Thompson submachine gun. I can remember later on in Florida Blanca, we still had, the Japanese would infiltrate Air Force camps at night. They wouldn't bother with an infantry camp because those guys are trained to kill them. Air Force soft touch. And one night I hear something scraping along the side of the tent. And oh my God, what's that? It's scraping a little farther, coming around to where the door is. So I grabbed my Thompson submachine gun and headed up at port. And I must have taken the safety off prematurely or something. And then I heard, and I just jerked, and I headed up at port properly. I shot 6 holes through the top of the tent. And later on I got a statement of charges, you know. But it was a carabao, a water buffalo.
Right.
They call them carabao in the Philippines. And they're just scraping along the tent, trying to find its way between all the, you know, the tent pegs and strings or something.
Now, when the Japanese were infiltrating the camps, what were they trying to do?
They would usually head for the mess hall because on several occasions there would be no breakfast or breakfast will be delayed. We'd hear shots at night, but you don't know if it's just a nervous guard or something.
So they were just looking to feed themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
Were they trying to do any other sabotage or just coming in to get something to eat and go off again?
I think it was primarily to get something to eat, yeah.
Because there were a number of different places in different parts of the Pacific where Japanese soldiers left behind.
Oh, some of them held out for 40 years.
Yeah. But some of them just kind of would wander into the American camps and get something to eat and go off again.
As Americans, we couldn't tell the difference between the Japanese and the Filipinos. But the Filipinos could tell. They'd see somebody walking a half mile. Japanese. They could tell by the way they walked. But we couldn't. Because they'd steal civilian clothes and try to fit in. And
Right. What kind of relations did you have with Filipinos? Did you have them at your base, or did you work with any of them? Or
well, some of the young girls would come in to pick up laundry, and some of the older women and very young children would come at the mess tent. We'd have a little bit of coffee left, or tag in of dehydrated eggs or whatever. They'd hold out something while they're feeding the pigs. I think they were feeding themselves because you'd see them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those people were very, very poor. And supplies and things like that.
No men, no old women, and very young children. So we reached a point where we'll leave a whole toast or a good-looking bunch of this or that, you know, for them to eat.
All right. Okay. Now, where all did you go in the Philippines? You go to Leyte first, and so you were at Tacloban for a while. Now, did you go up to Luzon eventually, the main island, or?
Yeah. Well, we were in Mindoro, but for a very, very short time.
Okay. And then you mentioned Florida Blanca. Where is that?
Yeah. That's quite interesting. I would assume it's 50 miles away, about 50 miles away from Manila, because one time I borrowed a Jeep and went into Manila. But interesting, I look at today's maps, there's no Florida Blanca. There's no Finschhaven or no Hollandia and New Guinea. Of course, they're no longer Dutch protectorates, but
Right. Now, what were you doing there? Were you just still kind of going from base to base and just volunteering for things, just go where they send you? All right.
They stopped paying me, and they don't even know I'm here. What a weird feeling.
So they weren't paying you?
Yeah.
How long did that go on?
Like 4 months.
4 months, all right.
There's no place to spend the money anyway.
Yeah, you said you drove down into Manila once. What did you see when you got there?
This wrecked buildings, just all kinds of wrecked buildings.
Okay, so the city is still not in very good shape at that point.
No.
All right. Now, where did you go from the Philippines, or when you left the Philippines, what happened? So you were talking before the interview about having to drive a gasoline truck in a convoy.
Yeah, we didn't know where we were going. We were at Florida Blanca, and then following enlisted men, and we get on trucks and we drove somewhere else. And that's where they were assembling a convoy. That's where there's a guy whose MOS was truck driver. He actually laid on the ground and cried. He didn't want to drive the truck, so I volunteered to.
Well, what was wrong with driving the truck on that occasion? Where were you going that he didn't want to drive through?
Well, we didn't know. I didn't know, but maybe he knew. We were going through Zigzag Pass. It was a mountain pass, steep jungle.
Right.
Rising up on both sides.
Okay. And then what happened as you were driving along with that?
Well, we were proceeding very slowly, but the convoy stopped and they sent a runner back and said that the Japanese had thrown a log jam across the road. You heard some rifle fire, but just sporadic. It, might have been just several Japanese.
So you had to sit around there for a while until someone cleared it out and you could move along.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah. Well, actually, it sounds so pathetic at the time. We went through this mountainous pass, and there's still some Japanese, and they're firing on the convoy. Now, I'll be damned, we come and get a lone an infantryman in some kind of little half-ass shelter, just this big, facing the road. And holy mackerel, he's out here by himself. There could be Japanese behind him. Anyway, there's sporadic rifle fire and hitting the trucks and everything, and this infantryman says, I know where they're firing from, and he took off. And I followed him. I thought, if he gets shot, I could pick up his rifle or something. And we reached a point where looked like a kid. Well, the Japanese are small in stature. Most of them were. He looked like a 15-year-old kid or something. And he starts walking, and he's got his hands up like this. And there's a little creek, and he started walking across the creek, and then he started running. The infantryman pulled up his rifle and shot him. I said, what the hell did you shoot him for? He said, wait. Anyway, he fell down in the water, and then in no time at all, the infantryman stayed back, and I stayed back too. Maybe he was figuring maybe there's some other whatever. A couple of Filipinos came out they dragged him out of the water, turned him with his face up. They're kicking him in the, I thought, holy God, how brutal. The infantryman said, a lot of these Japanese have gold teeth, that's what they're after. But then when I'd asked him, why did he shoot him? He had a hand grenade with a wire.
Oh.
And they had a custom of, they'd raise their hands like this, and when they'd get close, they'd raise them more, or do something and kill themselves and kill you too.
Right. All right. So that one lone man had a pretty good idea what he was doing.
Yeah.
All right. Now, where did you actually wind up going then, once you got out of there? Did they send you to Okinawa next, or?
Yeah, we went to Okinawa.
And was the fighting over in Okinawa by the time you got there, or was it still going on?
It was all confined at one end of the island.
Yeah.
And we were at a recently completed airstrip on the opposite end of the island. So we didn't get to see any Okinawans or anything.
Right. Were you there while there were kamikaze attacks going on or things like that?
Oh, yeah.
So did you see much of that or just hear about it?
Just from a distance, yeah. Hear the anti-aircraft guns and hear the planes and so on.
Okay. Now, did you have any official assignment here either, or were you just still moving along
Still Mr. Nobody.
no particularly good reason? All right.
I don't remember at what point, but we were on Okinawa. We heard Roosevelt died. And of course, no newspaper, no television, nothing. And Roosevelt died. Oh my God. So somebody said, we said, who's going to be president now? Because I didn't,
Yeah, he'd been president forever.
yeah, but we didn't know about Truman.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I don't know, he had a men's store in Kansas City or something. There goes the war.
Mm-hmm.
I thought we were going to lose this damn thing. He turned out to be quite a gutsy guy in the long run.
Now, do you remember hearing, were you still in Okinawa when they used the atomic bombs?
Yeah, all we heard was, oh, we really dropped a big one.
Mm-hmm.
We just thought it was a large bomb.
Yeah.
We didn't know.
So you weren't thinking of it at the point when the news came out. You weren't looking at that as this is going to end the war. This was just,
It was a
we just dropped a big bomb.
very large bomb.
All right. And then what was the response when you learned of the Japanese surrender?
Oh, that was simple. The war is over.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I know, we won.
Mm-hmm.
You go down to Naha Harbor tomorrow morning, you're going to pick us up. Did that for, I don't know, I think the war was over in August.
Yeah.
And anyway, August, September, October, November, much of December, go down to Naha Harbor every morning.
Mm-hmm. So do you have anything?
And the rumors going around, Golden Gate in 48.
Mm. Did you have anything to do? I mean, were there jobs you could pick up, or were you just sitting around killing time? Or
There was absolutely nothing to do. Nobody bothered us. We'd just go and eat 3 times a day.
mm-hmm. Did they bring in the USO or anything like that, or you just?
That was mostly for Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We never saw any USO
See
or
that
anybody
stuff.
else.
All right. Did they show movies there or anything like that?
We used to have outdoor movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we had one guy, you know, that rumor of Golden Gate in 48. We had one guy hang himself, another guy put a 45 in his mouth. And we were speculating, well, what do they send his parents?
Mm-hmm.
They said, oh, they killed in action. I don't know if that was true or not, but
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, how did you finally learn that you were actually leaving? Did you just go down to Naha Harbor and one day your name was on a list, or how did that work?
The name was on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ship out there again, another freighter.
Mm-hmm.
And they had ducks. You ever heard of ducks?
Yeah, the amphibious trucks.
Yeah. Years later, they were up in
Wisconsin
Wisconsin and
Dells,
other
yeah.
places. Yeah, they put us on the ducks and climb up the cargo net
Mhm.
and get on the ship. And there again, we left Okinawa sometime before Christmas, and normally that'd be, I don't know, 5-day trip or something. 21 days.
Mm-hmm.
The ship lost a screw, a propeller,
Uh-huh.
whatever. They didn't tell us. They don't tell you anything. And finally, at 21 days, maybe the war is nowhere. Where the hell are we going now? And finally, we get, well, it happened to be the Columbia River, and some guy from Oregon said, I know where we are. This is the Columbia River. Okay, we're home.
So when did you finally get back home then?
Well, we landed in Vancouver Barracks January 3rd, and I got home February 6th.
All right. What did you do in between? Just wait some more, or?
Yeah, hurry and wait.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a negative experience too. You get home, and the ship pulled up somewhere. There was a makeshift dock.
Mm-hmm.
Just stayed there. There's nobody. There's no welcome home or anything. There's nobody around.
Right.
And we're there until about 2 o'clock in the morning. And now hear this, you know, everybody up. And a bunch of army trucks with the canvas over them
Mm-hmm.
lined up, and we climbed down the cargo net with our sole possession, our duffel bag, and
Mm-hmm.
get on the trucks. And we drive into what later found out was Vancouver Barracks, Washington. Must have been beautiful out there. You look out at the post. They didn't leave us off the post. I don't know if they thought we'd act up after being confined so long,
Yeah.
but they tested us for everything. And I thought, I volunteered for this. Now they're checking me to make sure I'm not bringing a disease back to my own. I was just livid with that. And I can remember, maybe it was later when we took a train to Camp Grant, Illinois, where they said, well, you can report over here to pick up your medals. And one guy said, yeah, with a quarter, one of those you can buy a cup of coffee, if that. So none of us picked up our medals.
Because those would have been, I guess, probably theater medals or campaign medals. If you were in this place or this one, you get a ribbon for this or something for that.
Yeah, my daughter finally gave me an address. I got my medals in 1948. That's cool. I got a Good Conduct Medal, American Defense Medal, Asiatic Pacific Medal with 1 silver star, Philippine Liberation Medal with 2 bronze stars, Army of Occupation Medal with Japan clasp, and World War II Victory Medal.
So did being on Okinawa count as Army of Occupation for Japan?
Yeah.
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 Okay, because that was Japanese territory.
I didn't know it at the time.
All right. Now, once you finally get home, like February '46, did you go back to work for that engineering company in Chicago, or did you do something else?
I got home on a Friday night. I can remember I have trouble containing myself.
Probably shouldn't fiddle with that too much, because that may make noise on the tape.
So we got back in this country on January 3rd, and they asked us to give the name of our wife or parents or somebody. They sent a telegram. I saw the telegram later. It just said, arrive safely. Please don't try to contact me. I didn't send it, but
Okay.
anyway, we were all that isolation, and I didn't call home or I didn't do anything. And I got home. I remember taking the North Shore and the elevated and the streetcar. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. I rang the doorbell. My mother said, I knew you'd come home, so she left the Christmas tree up.
An old Christmas tree by then, but still there.
Yeah, it was February 6th. So that's that. And I just put every bit of that way behind me. Now that I'm an old man, it starts coming out, and I get embarrassed by talking about it.
All right. So did you go back to the same kind of work you were doing before the war? Did you pick that up again?
Yeah, and I thought I won't remember anything about it. But after a week, I thought, oh, yeah, this is where I belong.
All right.
And I can remember my father telling me, stick with it when I didn't like it on the road.
Yeah.
Someday you'll get into the engineering department. I got into the engineering department, and then I got into sales. Then I went to work for another company. Then I was sales manager. And when I retired, I was the president of the company at age 50. So I think Dad gave me good advice.
Pretty good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you had a military career that was sort of not exactly typical. I mean, I've encountered other people who sort of had this kind of thing where they bounce around and they're never really doing probably exactly what would have made the most sense for them to do. Overall, what kind of effect do you think that whole experience had on you? Did you gain anything from it or learn anything in a way, or did they just waste your time for a few years?
Pretty much a waste of time.
All right.
If I had to do it over with, I would not have been as stubborn. I would have went to officers candidate school. I wouldn't be a flying officer, but I would have become an officer because I'd half it completed up at Fort Brady.
Right.
And they probably could have come out of the war as a captain instead of a corporal.
On the other hand, you could have been a second lieutenant in the Battle of the Bulge and lasted 10 minutes. So,
Yeah.
who knows, one way or another. All right. Well, while it wasn't necessarily the typical story exactly, it's one that tells us quite a bit about how different parts of the military functioned at that time and some of the range of experiences people had.
So, yeah, so many, especially young people, are not aware of the fact that we're a superpower today. The onset of World War II, we had a smaller army than Switzerland,
Right.
smaller air force than
Romania. Yeah, I know the army was smaller than Romania by quite a bit, but yeah, and we had to go create that.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the middle of creating something from scratch, then
It was a productive capacity in a sheltered area. That's what did it. A lot of credit goes to those who were here in the country.
Yep, and part of what we do is we try to collect all of those stories too.
Yeah.
Make as complete a picture as we can. All right, well, just thank you for coming in and talking to me today and
You're
sharing your
welcome.
story.
I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. And if I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.